Hey everyone, it's George here, and this time I'm bringing a deck review for the Fated One of Unparalleled Varga Drag Race. It's basically the Fated One card for Dragon Empire, and it's actually a very strong, very easy, and very fun to play deck. So yeah, if you're interested in building this one, I hope this video can help you to understand a little bit more about the playstyle and what kind of things you can do with it. Anyways, if you are enjoying this content, feel free to leave a like, comment, and if you also want to share this, that would be very helpful. Also, if there's anything else that I'm missing after I finish this, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I've played this deck a lot, and I think it's not very easy, but if there may be some things that I'm missing as well. Anyways, I will be starting with the Rideline. So yeah, for the Rideline, this is the updated version, which has been used a lot recently in Japanese format. It includes cards from the boosters 2. At the time of making this video, I think booster 2 has been already released in the English format, but I'm actually not so sure. But yeah, anyways, for the grade 0, actually it doesn't really matter. You can use any grade 0 that you want. I'm using here the one from booster 2 just to showcase it. The biggest difference here is basically just the grade 1, which is Rising Star Virgilia. Basically it has two effects. The first one is on the Vanguard circle. It gets 2000 power for every other rearguard that you have during your turn, which is actually very good because usually people will just like to guard one Vanguard attack with 15k, but if it gets extra power, then maybe someone will think a little bit more about it. And also it has another effect which I think is very useful, which is when you would ride for your ride deck, you can just Soul Blast 1 instead of discarding one card, which actually it helps a lot for this deck. Then we have the grade 2, which would be Boulder Axe Dragon, was released on the DZ Booster 1. So yeah, it should be pretty easy to get. Basically it has a Vanguard effect. When the Varga rides on top of it, basically you just call it a rearguard, and that's as much as we're interested for now. For this second version of the Rideline, again, the grade 0 doesn't really matter. The only big change here is the grade 1, which has a very similar effect as the grade 2 one, which is basically when you ride Boulder Axe Dragon on top of it, you call this card to the rearguard and Soul Charge 1. And also it has another effect on rearguard, which is basically if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga, this unit gets 2000 power. So basically it just turns itself into a 10,000 booster. Then we will continue to the main Vanguard, which would be the Fated One of Unparalleled Varga Drag Race. It has two effects. The first one is when it attacks, you basically counter blast 1, retire every single front row rearguard on the field, which will be including yours and your opponent's. Also, it will get 10,000 power for the rest of the turn, and at the end of the battle that it attacked, you can just restand it with -2 drives, which is actually very powerful. If your Divine Skill doesn't kill you, you basically just have restander for the rest of the game anyways. So it's always going to be 2 Vanguard attacks. And then we have the Divine Skill, actually, which if your opponent is grade 3, and at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, and if your opponent has at least 4 damage, basically you counterblast 1 and restand this unit, and it gets +2 drive checks. So basically you have to attack twice with this before activating Divine Skill. So you will lose your drive checks and then attack, and then Divine Skill, restand it, and it gets the drive checks back. So basically it would be 4 drive checks and 3 attacks, which is actually very strong. And especially it gets very strong with this support that this card has around it, which we will be talking about after. So one of the cards that is, I think, kind of important for this deck is this grade 3 of Dressy Glaive Dragon. actually, it has a very interesting effect, which is it cannot be retired as long as you have only one of these guys on the front row. And basically, after using Varga's effect, you should be retiring the front row. However, if this was going to be retired, instead it just stays there, and it's going to have 10,000 power, basically, for just existing there. And also, there's another very cool thing about this guy. If you have Varga as a Vanguard, you can just use this as a 13k booster, which very often it happens that you kind of need it. So yeah, this card is just a beater, basically, and it's actually very strong during your Persona right turn, or even when you're using your Divine skill. So yeah, many people use this guy as a 2-off. I think that's mostly the correct amount that you should be using. But if you want to use more, I think still kind of good choice. Then we will be talking about the grade 2 from the Rideline, which is Boulder Axe Dragon. So as I mentioned before, basically this card gets called to the rear guard after you ride on top of it. But on rear guard, it has another effect. So basically, if you have Varga as Vanguard, it will get 5,000 power, and at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, you basically retire this and draw one. So yeah, basically this card is very good for early rush, and also it has extra draw power. And it's very important because basically you're just going to retire your front row. So if you attack with this one first, basically you just get one draw and you don't really retire anything. So yeah, there's other cards that also are kind of good in the front row. Or actually, I think they're better, to be honest. But if you pair this one with something else on the front row, it's always also a very good thing. Like, for example, another one of the front row cards that I think is very good as a pair is this one, the Drag Ritter Shura, which has two effects. The first one is on attack, you can Energy Blast 2 and it gets 5,000 power. It's only for that battle. However, included with this, it has another effect. You can choose one of your rear guards that is not herself or doesn't include her name, and it will give that unit an effect. Basically, when you would retire that unit, instead of going to drop zone, it goes back to your hand, which is actually very useful because you can recycle your rear guards, and also many of those rear guards that will go back to your hand have draw effects or some kind of bonus effect. So you can just abuse the draws from those cards and also just call them back. So yeah, when it's also, it has another effect. The second one is when it's retired by Varga, you can just counter plus 1 and call her back with 10,000 power. And also, it's important to note the first effect is not a once per turn. So basically, you can attack with her, then just give effect to something as long as you have enough energy, of course. And then you retire her, call her back with 10,000 power, and then you can use her effect once more. So yeah, this is a very important piece for this deck for multi-attacks. And also, it's very good to help you keep your hand size. So basically, you can just call cards from your hand, use them to boost, for example, and then when they get retired, you can just add them back to your hand and use them to guard, or maybe just call them once more the next turn. One of the grade 1 cards, for example, is this one, the Battle Monk of Raging Flames, Rokusel. This one is from Booster 2, and it has two main effects. The first one is kind of similar to the Blankmeyer the Butcher one I talked before. Basically, this guy is when you call him, for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot intercept, which is actually very good with this deck because that way you are basically just retiring your opponent's rear guards, your opponent's front row rear guards, inevitably. Yeah, and it has another effect, which is when any of your opponent's units, or actually when any player's unit is retired in the same column as this card in the front row, you can just retire this guy and draw one card. So yeah, as I mentioned before with the grade 2, basically you can give this guy the effect, you call this, your opponent cannot intercept, and then you retire this and it goes back to your hand, so you can use this effect for the next turn if your opponent gets to call more cards on the front row. They cannot use them to intercept, and you get to draw one more card. So yeah, it's very important to just remember not to call this guy behind the Vanguard, because since nothing will be retired in that same column, then the effect won't be working here. So yeah, never call this behind Vanguard. And this is the card that you actually want to call behind your Vanguard, which is the Impale Horn Dragon. Basically, this is the main booster for this deck, which is 5k extra when boosting. And if it's boosting Varga, it will get just an extra 2000, so it will be turning into 15k booster. And also it has another effect at the end of the battle that this unit boosted Varga as a Vanguard. Basically, you can Soul Blast 1, retire this card, and draw 1. So yeah, for the draw effect, it has to be boosting the Vanguard. For the just the 5k power, it can boost anything. So yeah, I think probably you want to have this guy all the time behind your Vanguard. So it's very good for draw power, and it's also very good for boosting. So depending on the situation, you can just choose who to give the effect from the grade 2. You can give it to this one or the other grade 1. In the end, it basically just depends on you. So yeah, as for that's actually it for the support cards for Varga, but we have other cards that are also used in this deck, like the grade 2. This guy has a very long name, so I'm not going to say the whole thing. I'm just going to say Golgaflan, and I'm probably butchering that one as well. So yeah, basically it has one effect, one main effect here, which is the discard fodder for the right face. When you discard it, you can Soul Blast 1, put it back to the bottom of the deck, and you draw one card. But it has actually another very interesting effect, which is when in your Persona right turn, if you call this guy to your rear guard, you can just Counterblast 1 and retire all of your opponent's rear guards in the same column as this unit. So actually, you can actually just pair this guy with the grade 1, and you can proc the grade 1 effect. So you can just retire it and draw one card in case you need it. Doesn't really happen that often actually, because the Counterblast is very necessary for this deck. But yeah, it can happen sometimes, I suppose, and maybe if you want to use this effect, why not? I guess that's fine. But also, this deck is also using the other discard fodder guy, which is Drag Raider Fallheart. Basically, when this guy is discarded for riding, only for riding, or when this card is placed on Guardian Circle, you can Energy Blast 3 or Counterblast 1, and you draw one card. It also has another effect similar to the other guy, when only useful when you Persona Ride. Again, on Persona Ride turn, you call this guy to a rear guard, and just like the previous effect, you can either Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to use this effect. And basically, you can just call grade 1 from your drop zone as long as it's not a Sentinel. So yeah, it can be very useful also sometimes to just call the grade 1s that you need to have in your back row in order to draw more cards or have extra booster. Yeah, and also this deck plays usually Disorder, which is Drag Resonance. I think it's also from Booster 2, and it has a very important effect. I think it's very good for Dragon Empire decks actually, which is basically once per turn, if your Vanguard restands, you give your front row 10,000 power. It's basically another Persona Ride. I mean, more like a front trigger actually. But yeah, Varga restands twice, right? So this card basically just allows your front row to always get at least 10,000 extra power. So a non-Persona Ride turn can turn into a Persona Ride like turn for the extra power, almost. And yeah, on the Persona right turn, basically you just get 20,000 to the front row, which is actually very, very strong. If you're also topping that with the Divine skill, it's very deadly. So yeah, these are some other options. I've seen some people play them. Personally, I don't really like these other guys. Maybe the cat. It's actually could be good sometimes. You can just call it to rear guard and draw one card, or just use it as a defensive option. This extra 15,000 power as a shield are actually very good. Yeah, it could be. Usually, it's not so necessary, but it happens that if it happens, it happens. Like you can just use it to guard sometimes. Then the other option is the new guy from the festival booster for Regalis. I'm just gonna call it like that. Basically, the most useful effect here is the soul charge with the extra power. You can retire one as well, just as a bonus effect. Also, sometimes if you have something useful in your soul, that could be good just to call it. But actually, this deck doesn't really make so much soul, as far as I know. And yeah, so mostly it's just a generic useful piece sometimes. And also the grade 1 Drag Rater Mid-Hat. Basically, when your Vanguard restuns, you can just retire this guy and draw one card. It's fine. It's just an 8k booster that draws you one card. I don't really like it that much. The boosters this deck has already are very good. So yeah, but if you want to try something with this guy, probably it's very good inclusion. Now, as for triggers, I prefer to play just 8 criticals, 4 heals, and 3 draws. I think there's some people that has experimented with front triggers, but personally I don't really like fronts so much, because sometimes your front row, it's just one of them is retired forever and the other one just like stays. Sometimes both of them stay, but critical trigger is always like safe. And as for over triggers, I think the blue over trigger is actually very, very strong. Just giving that extra critical to something is always good. And I've seen some people also experimenting with a purple one. I tried to play this guy also a couple times. I think it's fine, not super, super good, but it works sometimes. The extra heal is okay, but it's important to know that with this deck, you actually want to kill very fast. So yeah, healing is not as useful, I think, as the extra critical. So I think overall the extra critical, the blue over trigger may be the best option. But again, this is trigger section, so please feel free to experiment as you wish. Now for the Regalis Piece, the one that I think is the most consistent for this deck is the Persona Raid one, because you really want to hit very hard. 2 Vanguard attacks or 3 Vanguard attacks. Sometimes you don't get your Persona Raid or your copy of your Vanguard, so having this extra option is always good. And also another option could be the Racing Angel Ladder. This card is always good in every deck that you want to play it. Just extra protection. Sometimes your field is maybe not so good, or sometimes you just need that extra power or your extra draw. Just very strong card and simple. You can just include this card if you don't know what else to put in, and you're probably gonna be fine. And also, I've seen some people playing this next Regalis Piece, which is Union the Sky. It has actually 2 effects. It's very interesting. So far, I think this one is just a promo for Japan, but maybe will be released in the English format soon. But yeah, just in case, basically this has 2 effects. The first one is when discarded to ride. I think it's only for riding a grade 3. You can just remove this card from the game, and yeah, you draw 1 card. And also it has another effect. It's as a blitz order, a little bit more defensive. Basically, the effect is when your Vanguard gets attacked, you can just get 15,000 power, And if you remove one copy of your Vanguard from your soul or from your drop zone, it gets another 10,000 shield. So yeah, it's very simple, good effect. Some people try playing it, but personally I would go with the Regalis Piece, which is the Persona Right one. But again, this part is a little bit more open, so please feel free to experiment as you like. So yeah, some of the interactions, again, this is very simple. The interactions are very easy actually. The most easy one and basic is basically the grade 2 Shura. On attack, Energy Blast 2, choose one of your back row rear guards basically, which would be, well, it doesn't say back row rear guards, but most of the time you will be choosing your boosters. You can just choose either the on call or the booster for the Vanguard, and basically when they get retired, you just get them back to your hand. Which one you choose actually depends on sometimes on the matchup, sometimes on your hand, sometimes on the field, and also it's important to notice that even if the cost is just 2 energy, sometimes you end up paying too much energy and you don't have enough, so you really have to think which one you want to give the effect to. Also, I think it depends sometimes on how many copies of each card you have in your hand. So yeah, if you don't have many of the Rokusel guy, you can just like get it back to your hand. And sometimes it's better to just have extra of this guy, just to make sure you can retire your opponent consistently and get rid of the intercepts. So yeah, it depends on you a lot, and that's pretty much for this combo. This is basically just how one of the most powerful turns goes like. First, you basically want to start your turn with playing the order, which will give your front row 10,000 power after your Vanguard restance for the first time. And you want to start attacking with Shura and activate her effect. You can choose one of your back row rear guards, give the effect. When they boost, they retire. Instead of going to drop zone, they go back to your hand and you draw one card. Very simple. Then basically you want to attack with your Vanguard, which will give 10,000 to itself. And then when it will retire the front row. And if you retire the grade 3 dragon, basically just nothing happens. And if you retire the grade 2, you can just control +1 and call her back with extra 10,000 power. And then after she gets called back, you restand your Vanguard and you get extra 10,000 power to your Vanguard, and basically have very, very heavy hitting columns after that. And if it's the Divine Skill turn, you can attack again with Varga, and then restand again, and then attack again. So basically you can just attack with the front row rear guard first, and then attack 3 times in a row with your Vanguard, and then attack with the rear guards once more. If you attack with Shura again, the last attack, you can just give the effect to any of the back row rear guards again, and if they boosted, then they get retired and you get to draw one more card. So it keeps hand size a lot, and you draw a lot of cards, and it's very defensive. And yeah, usually by the end of this turn, if you did exactly this, your opponent is like super dead. So yeah. And actually that's pretty much it for the combos, to be honest. This is just showing the most hypothetically powerful turn you can get. So yeah, it's very simple, very straightforward, and effective, to be honest. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this. So yeah, these are some deck examples. This is one of the Japanese lists. Basically, it's using the Virgila Rideline here. It's using the grade 3 order as well, and pretty much everything else is just very standard. And here, this is one for the English version. It's again just normal Rideline from the set 1. It's using the grade 1 cat here, and the rest of the deck, it's just basically same as before. So yeah, interactions are very straightforward. You keep drawing a lot of cards and stay very defensive all the time. So there's basically not going wrong here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This deck has many good things, as it's very easy to pilot. It has very high power turns. When you're going for the kill, it's usually very explosive, and it's actually very easy to find the game pieces because you actually just really need like what, two of them, the grade 2 and the grade 3, that the grade 2 that just sends things back to your hand, Shura, and the grade 3 dragon. If you have either of them, you're pretty much set. Of course, you want to have Shura most of the time, but if you don't have her, it's not the end of the world. In the end, this deck just mainly focuses on your Vanguard attacks, and it's actually, again, very easy to pilot. However, some of the counters for this deck is, if your opponent is prepared for this, they most likely won't let you get them to 4 damage. Or that's the first thing. If they don't get to 4 damage, you don't get your divine skill. But also, sometimes if your opponent has a very good hand, at least something I like to do, and I've seen some people do, is they just let you use your divine skill as soon as possible, and then from there they can just guard everything else very easily. So yeah, actually you have to be careful a little bit when you want to use your divine skill. Preferably I like to use that when I have the order card together with a persona ride, but not always happens to be like that. But yeah, sometimes you just have to be careful. Another thing is, actually this deck relies a lot on Counterblast. So yeah, Varga uses 2 Counterblast, 1 each turn at least, and on Divine Skill turn you have to use another one, and Shura uses 1 Counterblast every time you have to call her. So if you have 2 Shuras on the field, you can of course retire both of them, but you will be using 3 Counterblast at least for the turn, because Varga will be using 1 and 2 from the Shuras, and if you're using Divine Skill, then that's the 4th Counterblast. And this deck doesn't really have ways to get counter charge. You could probably use the Regalis Piece that counter charges, but actually I don't think it's also super good. But yeah, if you've tried and you think it's good, yeah, please feel free to let me know. I mean, there's many options for this. So yeah, basically just be careful to not get baited into using your divine skill early, and be careful when using your Counterblast. So yeah, basically that's pretty much it for this deck. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, if there's anything I'm missing, feel free to let me know. Anyways, have a nice one, and yeah, see you around. Bye bye.